The billionaire's children never listened to anyone. They thought they knew everything. They ignored teachers, disrespected their parents, and even mocked the people around them. But one day, their maid, quiet, humble, and wise, decided to teach them a secret lesson that would change everything. And the billionaire didn't even see it coming. Before we dive in, we'd love to know, where are you watching from? Comment your country below, and if you enjoy heartwarming stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories every week. The morning sun gleamed over the sprawling estate of billionaire Jonathan Whitmore, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors of his mansion. Golden chandeliers reflected the light, scattering it in every corner of the grand hall. Outside, perfectly trimmed hedges framed the pristine garden, and exotic flowers lined the stone pathway leading to the main gate. Everything about the Whitmore residence screamed wealth and power, but inside, despite the grandeur, something was missing. Jonathan Whitmore was a man used to control. A self-made billionaire, he had built his empire from nothing and believed everyone should operate according to his rules. Yet at home, he struggled with two things he couldn't control: his children. His son, Alexander, 17, was charming but reckless, always trying to outsmart everyone around him. His daughter, Isabella, 15, had a sharp tongue and an even sharper sense of entitlement. Both were used to having their way, brushing aside teachers, tutors, and even their parents' instructions as if they were trivial inconveniences. Alexander, "Isabella, stop running around like fools!" Jonathan's voice echoed through the mansion's main hall, but as usual, his shouts went ignored. Alexander raced past the grand staircase, smirking while Isabella twirled her long, silk scarf around her fingers, laughing at her brother's antics. In the background, quietly moving about her duties, was Marjorie, the Whitmore's maid. A woman in her late 30s with deep, thoughtful eyes and a calm presence, she navigated the chaos of the household with grace. Her uniform was simple, unassuming, but her demeanor commanded subtle respect. She had worked for the Whitmores for several years, yet the children treated her with little regard, tossing toys at her or whispering rude comments whenever she passed. Marjorie had grown used to it. She never raised her voice, never complained, and never reacted angrily. Instead, she observed. She noticed patterns, behaviors, and small details others overlooked, the way Alexander avoided responsibility, how Isabella demanded attention, and the cracks in the Whitmores' seemingly perfect household. Most importantly, she noticed one thing. The children were capable of learning, if only someone could reach them in the right way. "Marjorie," Alexander called out mockingly, tossing a model airplane toward her. It landed with a soft thud against the polished floor. She bent slightly to pick it up, her expression unchanged. "Yes, Alexander?" she said softly, her tone calm but firm. "You're so slow. Why even bother picking it up?" He sneered, expecting a reaction. Marjorie smiled faintly, holding the airplane delicately. "Because things matter, Alexander. Even small ones." "Even when no one's watching!" Alexander laughed, unconvinced, and ran off toward the garden. Isabella rolled her eyes dramatically, plopping herself onto the velvet sofa. "He's impossible," she muttered, tossing her scarf onto the floor. Jonathan, observing from the study through a tall glass window, shook his head. "Honestly, Marjorie, what do you even do around here? They'll never change." Marjorie's eyes met his briefly, calm and steady. She didn't argue. She didn't need to. She had her plan, and she knew that in time the children would learn, but it wouldn't be through scolding or punishment or authority. It would be through experience, subtle guidance, and a lesson that came from the heart. The tension in the mansion was palpable. The children's laughter rang hollow against the silent walls of luxury, echoing off priceless paintings and statues. Money and opulence surrounded them, but respect, empathy, and understanding were absent. And that was precisely what Marjorie intended to change. Later that morning, a minor incident set the stage. Alexander, in a rush to show off his new drone, accidentally flew it into the glass greenhouse. A loud crash echoed through the estate as shattered glass and broken flower pots littered the marble floor. Isabella gasped, stepping back in shock, while Alexander froze, eyes wide, realizing the severity of what he'd done. Jonathan stormed in seconds later, his face crimson with fury. "Alexander, what have you done now?" His voice was sharp, commanding, terrifying in its intensity. Before Alexander could stammer out an excuse, Marjorie stepped forward. Calmly, almost imperceptibly, she surveyed the damage. She knelt, gently checking the plants, and then turned to the children with a soft, unwavering gaze. "This can be fixed," she said quietly. "But it will take patience, care, and responsibility. And I need your help to make it right." Alexander and Isabella blinked at her in surprise. No yelling, no scolding, just calm authority and genuine guidance. For the first time, they felt something they hadn't before. Their actions had consequences, and someone expected them to take responsibility. Jonathan, still fuming, muttered under his breath, "She can't possibly teach them anything. They'll never listen." Marjorie, however, smiled faintly, a glimmer of anticipation in her eyes. She knew the first seed had been planted. The children's journey of learning and transformation was about to begin, and by the end of it, not only would they change, but even Jonathan would have to see what he had been missing all along. As the camera of imagination pans over the mansion, viewers are left with the tension and curiosity. Can a humble maid really teach billionaire children a lesson they never expected? And what will it take for the arrogant father to finally notice? After the chaos in the greenhouse, the mansion fell into an unusual silence. Alexander hovered nervously near the shattered glass, his drone lying in pieces at his feet. Isabella, normally quick with a sarcastic remark, stayed unusually quiet, her arms crossed as she studied Marjorie. For the first time, the children realized that the consequences of their actions were real, and that the maid, quietly poised among the wreckage, held the key to fixing it. Marjorie took a deep breath, crouching down to inspect the broken pots and soil scattered across the marble floor. "It's not just about fixing what's broken," she said softly, her voice calm yet commanding attention. "It's about understanding the value of what you almost destroyed and taking responsibility for it," Alexander scoffed. "It's just a few flowers. Why are you making such a big deal out of it?" Marjorie's eyes met his, steady and unwavering. "Because it's not about the flowers, Alexander. It's about care, patience, and respect. If you can't understand that, you'll break more than just plants in life." Isabella frowned. "And how do you expect us to learn that?" With a gentle smile, Marjorie stood and motioned toward the greenhouse. "We're going to do this together, but in a way that makes you think for yourselves. You're going to plant new flowers and rebuild the pots, but each step will teach you something you didn't know about responsibility." Reluctantly, Alexander and Isabella followed her into the garden. Marjorie handed each of them a small trowel and a stack of broken clay pots. "You'll start by cleaning up the soil," she instructed. "And while you do that, I want you to think about why these plants matter, not just to the garden, but to everyone who cares for them." Alexander muttered under his breath, clearly unimpressed. Isabella rolled her eyes, but Marjorie didn't rush them. She moved gracefully between the two, quietly guiding their hands when needed, showing them how to handle the delicate seedlings and fragile pots. As they worked, she began to tell them a story, one that seemed unrelated at first. "Many years ago," Marjorie said, "I worked in a village where children didn't care about anything. They ignored rules, played rough, and often hurt each other without realizing it. But one day, their favorite tree, the one they played under every day, was destroyed by their own recklessness. They were heartbroken, but it was then that they learned something important, that their actions, no matter how small, have consequences." Alexander frowned. "That's just a story." Marjorie looked at him kindly. "At first, yes, but stories are powerful, Alexander. They teach us things that lectures never can. Today, this greenhouse is your tree. What you do next will determine whether you just feel guilty or whether you actually learn to care." Slowly, Alexander and Isabella began to take her words to heart. Their movements became more careful, their tones softer as they handled the plants and soil. The act of cleaning and replanting wasn't just physical, it was shaping their understanding of responsibility. Even Jonathan, watching from the study through his glass window, couldn't help but notice the change. His children, usually so defiant and careless, were now listening to someone he had dismissed as just a maid. He muttered under his breath, "I don't see how this could make any difference." But Marjorie knew. She smiled faintly as Alexander accidentally dropped a tiny seedling. Instead of scolding him, she knelt beside him. "It's okay," she whispered. "What matters is that you try again. Learning doesn't happen perfectly the first time." Alexander looked up at her, confused. No anger, no ridicule, just patience. For the first time, he felt a strange mix of respect and curiosity. Isabella, too, was watching closely, her sharp mind absorbing every instruction, every gentle correction. By the end of the morning, the greenhouse was transformed. Broken pots were carefully mended, soil had been meticulously rearranged, and young flowers now stood proudly in their new homes. Alexander and Isabella stepped back, eyes wide, not at the beauty of the garden, but at the pride of their own effort. Marjorie stood quietly, letting them admire their work. Then she spoke softly but with authority. "Remember this feeling? This is the result of responsibility, care, and patience. You can carry this lesson into everything you do." For the first time that day, Alexander spoke without sarcasm. I think I get it." Isabella nodded slowly. "Yeah, it's actually kind of satisfying seeing it all fixed." Marjorie smiled warmly, sensing the small victory. The first lesson had been planted, literally and figuratively. But the journey was far from over. As the children cleaned the last few pieces of broken clay, Jonathan finally stepped outside, curiosity and skepticism battling in his expression. He watched the children's hands, the careful placement of the flowers, and the quiet guidance of Marjorie. For the first time, he felt the faint stirrings of doubt about his own assumptions. Unbeknownst to him, a deeper lesson was unfolding, one that would soon challenge not only his children but his own understanding of respect, wisdom, and the true meaning of teaching. The morning's greenhouse incident had left a strange calm in the mansion, but it didn't last long. Alexander and Isabella, though slightly more mindful after their first lesson, soon realized that learning responsibility was harder than it seemed. Later that afternoon, Jonathan assigned the children a seemingly simple task: organize his private library while he was away in a meeting. The library was massive, filled with rare books, ancient manuscripts, and first editions worth more than most houses. The children, seeing it as an opportunity to escape chores, initially ignored the instructions. Alexander dragged a stack of books carelessly across the floor, while Isabella flipped through the pages of a rare manuscript, laughing at the dust motes dancing in the sunlight. Marjorie appeared quietly behind them, her calm presence immediately noticed but largely ignored. "Children," she said softly, "the task is not just to arrange the books. Each book has value, history, knowledge, and care. How you treat them reflects your character." Alexander snorted. "It's just books." "What's the big deal?" Marjorie didn't argue. Instead, she handed him a particularly old, leather-bound volume. "Try placing this carefully on the shelf. You'll see that patience changes everything." Reluctantly, Alexander held the book, fumbling at first. It slipped slightly from his hands, almost falling, but Marjorie caught it with ease, setting it gently back into his grip. "Notice how rushing creates mistakes," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Notice how careful attention protects what is precious. Apply that to everything in life." Isabella, still defiant, wandered over to a high shelf and tried to reach a rare manuscript without help. Predictably, the book slipped, scattering papers and notes across the polished floor. She gasped in shock. "Oh no!" Marjorie stepped forward immediately, kneeling to help her pick up the scattered pages. "Accidents happen," she whispered, "but what matters is learning from them. You can either blame others or you can fix what's broken." The children exchanged glances, sensing the gravity of her words. This wasn't a lecture. It was a lesson wrapped in action, and they were experiencing it firsthand. Alexander's usual arrogance faltered, and Isabella's sarcasm softened as they realized that carelessness had tangible consequences. As the afternoon progressed, Marjorie guided them patiently, letting them handle tasks while offering small hints and questions to make them think. "Why do you think this book is handled with gloves?" she asked. "Why is this manuscript stored in a special case?" "Everything has its place, its rules, its purpose." Jonathan, returning early from his meeting, paused in the doorway. His eyes narrowed as he observed the children's behavior. "They're organizing my library," he muttered under his breath. "They'll ruin everything." But as he watched, something unusual happened. Alexander carefully replaced a fragile volume without any prompting. Isabella carefully sorted a pile of rare manuscripts, checking each title before placing it down. Jonathan blinked in disbelief. It was the first time he'd seen them act with focus, patience, and respect. Marjorie didn't speak. She simply observed, letting the children internalize the lesson on their own. Her subtle approach worked far better than any scolding could have, yet rising tension remained. The children realized that even small mistakes could have serious consequences. One wrong move could destroy books worth millions. That awareness created both fear and motivation, a delicate balance that Marjorie skillfully maintained. By evening, the library was restored, more orderly than ever. Alexander and Isabella stood back, exhausted but strangely proud. For the first time, they felt the weight of responsibility, not as a punishment, but as an empowering experience. Jonathan, still standing in the doorway, finally spoke, a mixture of surprise and grudging respect in his voice. I didn't expect this." Marjorie's eyes met his briefly, calm and knowing. "Expect less. Observe more, Jonathan," she said softly, a faint smile playing at her lips. "Sometimes those we least expect to teach us the most." The children, too, had begun to notice her quiet strength. Alexander, looking at Marjorie for the first time without mockery, muttered, She actually knows what she's doing." Isabella nodded slowly, a newfound respect dawning. "Yeah, she's not just a maid," but Jonathan remained skeptical. He still believed that money, authority, and strict rules were the ultimate ways to teach life lessons. He didn't yet realize that the real teacher had been in his home all along, guiding his children with patience, wisdom, and heart. As night fell, the mansion was quiet once again. Yet beneath the calm exterior, change had begun. The children were no longer the same. They had tasted responsibility and care, even if only slightly. And Marjorie, watching from the hallway, knew that the next lesson would challenge them even further, and this time, it would strike at the heart of the family itself. The mansion buzzed with quiet tension the following morning. Jonathan had invited several high-profile business partners to the estate for a formal luncheon, a rare glimpse into his world of power and influence. Alexander and Isabella, now somewhat mindful after the previous lessons, were tasked with helping Marjorie prepare the garden pavilion for the event. At first, they approached the work half-heartedly, moving chairs and tablecloths carelessly, still holding on to their old habits. But Marjorie had anticipated this. She watched patiently, letting them make small mistakes while guiding them subtly. "Remember," she said softly, "attention to detail isn't just about the task, it's about respect. Respect for others and respect for yourself." The children hesitated, then gradually began to notice the elegance required for the event. The fine china, the crystal glasses, the perfectly arranged flowers. Every little oversight would be glaring to the guests. Alexander adjusted a chair carefully. Isabella aligned the silverware precisely. They both glanced at Marjorie for approval, receiving only a calm nod. Her silent encouragement spoke louder than any praise. As the guests arrived, the mansion filled with the murmur of sophisticated conversation. Jonathan welcomed them proudly, expecting nothing short of perfection. But inside, he remained unaware that his children were quietly rising to the occasion, applying the lessons Marjorie had instilled. A minor crisis suddenly struck. One of the crystal vases toppled from a pedestal, shattering against the marble floor. Gasps filled the room. Jonathan's eyes widened in horror, fearing the social disaster and the loss of an expensive heirloom. Before he could intervene, Alexander sprang into action, carefully gathering the remaining pieces, while Isabella gently repositioned the flowers in a nearby vase. Marjorie moved alongside them, silently guiding, but letting the children take full responsibility. The guests looked on in surprise. These were children who had never shown patience, responsibility, or composure, now handling a delicate situation with skill and calm. Jonathan stood frozen, his pride battling confusion. When the last piece was safely replaced, Marjorie finally spoke, her voice soft but firm. Mistakes happen. What matters is how you respond. You can panic, blame, or act wisely. Today, your response defined you. Alexander glanced at her, realization dawning. We actually did it, didn't we? He said, a mixture of pride and disbelief in his voice. Isabella nodded, her usual sarcasm gone. Yeah, and it actually feels good. Jonathan's gaze finally shifted from the children to Marjorie. For the first time, he truly saw her. Not as a maid, not as a subordinate, but as the guiding force behind this transformation. Every lesson, every subtle nudge, every calm word of wisdom had prepared his children to rise above their old habits. His heart panged with both awe and guilt. He had always believed that wealth, authority, and strict rules were the only ways to shape behavior. He had underestimated patience, humility, and intelligence disguised in simplicity. Marjorie stood silently, letting the moment settle. She didn't seek praise. She didn't demand recognition. Yet her influence was undeniable. The children now moved with confidence, responsibility, and respect, qualities Jonathan had never thought possible at their age. Finally, Jonathan spoke, his voice softer than usual, tinged with humility. Marjorie, I see now. You've taught them more than I ever could. More than anyone could. The children, too, looked at her with new understanding. Alexander, usually quick with a joke, said quietly, Thank you for showing us how to care. Isabella's nod was silent but heartfelt, her eyes glistening with newfound respect. Marjorie smiled faintly, a quiet victory in her gaze. She had planted the seeds of responsibility, patience, and integrity, and now they had blossomed in a way that not even money or power could achieve. As the guests enjoyed the perfectly arranged luncheon, the real lesson lingered quietly in the room. Wisdom doesn't always come from wealth, status, or authority. Sometimes it comes from those who quietly guide us with heart, patience, and intelligence. Jonathan Whitmore, for the first time in his life, understood this truth, and he knew he would never forget the woman who had taught it. The evening sun cast a warm, golden glow across the Whitmore estate as the last of the guests departed. The mansion, once filled with tension and chaos, now resonated with a rare sense of calm and fulfillment. Alexander and Isabella walked alongside Marjorie, their steps slower, more thoughtful, as they reflected on the day's lessons. For the first time, the children truly understood the weight of responsibility and the impact of their actions. Alexander carefully picked up a stray napkin, placing it neatly on the table. Isabella straightened the flower arrangements she had tended earlier, smiling faintly at the sight of their combined efforts. Jonathan approached quietly, his expression a mix of pride and humility. He stopped in front of Marjorie, his voice gentle, almost reverent. Marjorie, I owe you an apology. I underestimated you, and more importantly, I underestimated the lessons you could teach. Not just my children, but me as well. Marjorie's calm eyes met his, a soft smile touching her lips. I only guided them, Jonathan. The learning came from their hearts. You must remember, teaching isn't about authority or power, it's about patience, understanding, and believing in others, even when they don't believe in themselves. Alexander, usually quick with a joke or a sarcastic remark, spoke earnestly. We never realized how important responsibility is. Thank you, Marjorie, for showing us. We actually learned something today. Isabella nodded, her tone soft and sincere. Yeah, it's not just about doing tasks. It's about caring, thinking, and trying to be better. Jonathan's eyes softened as he looked at his children. For the first time, he saw them not just as spoiled kids, but as young individuals capable of growth, thanks to Marjorie's guidance. You've changed today, all of you, and I can't thank her enough, he said, gesturing toward Marjorie. Marjorie shook her head gently. No thanks are needed. True lessons are never about recognition. They're about transformation. As the night settled over the mansion, the children lingered nearby, talking quietly with Marjorie, absorbing her wisdom in ways they hadn't before. Jonathan watched from a distance, a newfound respect for her and for the quiet power of patience growing inside him. The family had learned something money couldn't buy: humility, care, and the true value of guidance. Before we leave, we want to hear from you, our viewers. Comment below and tell us, which part of the story touched your heart the most? And if you enjoyed this inspiring story, make sure to hit the subscribe button and click the notification bell. That way, you won't miss any of our uplifting stories that inspire, teach, and warm the heart. Remember, true wisdom and life lessons don't always come from those with wealth or power. Sometimes, the greatest teachers are those we least expect: quiet, patient, and full of heart. As the Whitmore estate settled into quiet, Marjorie walked back to her small room, smiling faintly to herself. The children had learned, Jonathan had realized, and the mansion was now filled not just with wealth, but with understanding, respect, and hope for the future. A simple lesson taught with care had changed everyone, and that was worth more than all the gold in the world.